The movie The Brutalist might sound like a celebration or condemnation of that famous architectural style with its unpolished concrete, imposing geometries, and fortress-like silhouettes. Yet, as many filmgoers discover, not everything is what it seems beneath the surface. Today we're going to look at how the movie The Brutalist might not be about brutalist architecture at all. To explore that question, we'll take a deep dive into two real-life icons of brutalist design: Marcel Breuer's St. John's Abbey Church and Erno Goldfinger's Trellick Tower, and see how these buildings embody many of the features we associate with brutalism. Consider first the architect Marcel Breuer, one of the many European masters who arrived in the United States before World War II and effectively reshaped American modern design. He was part of the Bauhaus school in Germany, that storied institution where architects and artists advance functionalism, simplicity, and modern materials. Breuer's background is essential to understanding how he eventually came to design St. John's Abbey Church in Collegeville, Minnesota, an edifice that many see as one of the most original statements of modern religious architecture in the country. The Benedictine monks at St. John's were looking toward the future in the 1950s, and the abbot at the time, Baldwin Dorschach, reached out to a dozen prominent architects to design a structure that would speak to new liturgical concepts as well as centuries-old monastic traditions. Breuer was tapped to submit his vision, and soon he was entrusted with shaping the campus's spiritual and functional center. St. John's Abbey Church belongs to the cast-in-place concrete tradition. Massive concrete trees support its soaring ceiling, creating an interior that feels both monumental and spiritual. And then there's the imposing bell banner that stands guard at the church's main entrance, a 112-foot sentinel that was originally intended to reflect sunlight into the sanctuary. Inside, everything radiates from a central altar with a dramatic center aisle and a vast choir area around it. The arrangement underscores the Benedictine value of community. Congregation, abbot, and monks all gather around the central point of worship, with no one too far off to see or hear. From a brutalist perspective, the building is characterized by its unabashed use of rough-textured concrete and large geometric shapes. The composition is as bold as it is honest about the materials used. There's no hiding behind ornamentation here. Yet the construction and artistic decisions for the new Abbey Church also sparked considerable controversy. Enter the story of Bronislaw, Bruno Bach, a Polish émigré and stained glass designer who would leave his indelible mark on the building by designing its colossal north window. Before immigrated to America, Bach fought in World War II and was captured as POW and imprisoned in a concentration camp for 5 years. In this context, there is a more direct connection between the main protagonist, Laszlo Toth, in The Brutalist, than to the common comparison Marcel Breuer. In fact, director of The Brutalist, Brady Corbett, in an interview, stated that the book about St. John's Abbey and its story about the conflict of Bach and Breuer inspired the movie. Bach's involvement provides a poignant parallel to the experiences of many immigrant artists and intellectuals who found themselves in unfamiliar contexts, negotiating layers of institutional hierarchy and creative scrutiny. In the mid-1950s, he was interviewed and eventually brought to Collegeville to take a teaching position, with the tentative promise of designing the massive north window. According to those who knew him, Bronislaw was excited by the prospect. Despite a pay cut and the uncertainties of academic life, he believed in his abstract, color-rich design that would harmonize with the imposing granite and concrete of Breuer's structure. Much like the building itself, nothing about implementing Bach's design was straightforward. Some factions within the church building committee strongly opposed him. They believed a more established artist deserved the job, or that the window should be more subdued to meld seamlessly with the church's brutalist lines. At one point, the art consultant Frank Kaczmarczyk openly criticized Bach's lack of reputation, effectively dismissing the merits of the design itself. Even Marcel Breuer, who initially approved of Bach's sketches, grew unsettled when the actual glass pieces seemed more colorful than expected. Bach's aesthetic, featuring circles against the grid of the hexagonal framework, risked injecting too much color or softness into an otherwise staunchly brutalist environment. And so the meetings carried on, some supportive, others scathing, until eventually it became a clash between the young artist's vision and the internationally acclaimed architect's desire to protect the integrity of his concept. During the same period, the Abbey Church was lauded nationwide. Publications talked about its raw, heroic forms and the revolutionary nature of building such a large, concrete church in a rural Minnesotan setting. But in many of those praises, Bach's contribution was sidelined or omitted altogether. The friction over the window, including attempts to literally gray out its vibrant colors with a tinted overlay, tested both the church's leadership and Bach's mental health. He resorted to drinking and sleeping pills to cope with the stress, while continuing to refine and rework the stained glass segments. At one point, Joseph Albers, another Bauhaus master, alongside with Marcel Breuer, was invited to submit a competing design. Albers himself reportedly saw nothing wrong with Bach's vision, but the tension remained nearly insurmountable. Ultimately, Bach's creation was installed, though it took extended committee debate and a controversial vote. Today, the multicolored geometric composition of the north window offers a curious counterpoint to the otherwise severe aesthetic of the church. Light filters through these hues, splashing the pews and concrete floors with an ethereal glow. It stands as a testament to monastic resilience, creativity, and the complexities behind architectural commissions. If we fly across the Atlantic to London, we can witness another landmark of brutalism, this time in the form of high-rise social housing, Erno Goldfinger's Trellick Tower. Completed in 1972, it was commissioned by the Greater London Council to address the acute post-war housing shortage. Like Breuer, Goldfinger belonged to an avant-garde tradition of modern design. He famously believed that high-rise towers, if well conceived, could simultaneously provide large, efficient living spaces and free up the ground for parks and communal activities. Trellick Tower followed on from his earlier Balfron Tower in Poplar, East London. The 31-story building presents a long, flat facade of exposed concrete, punctuated by a separate lift and service tower that is connected at every third level. This separate tower houses the utilities and plant room on its top floors and is visually set apart, giving Trellick its unmistakable silhouette. A testament to brutalist aesthetics, the tower's raw concrete surfaces, stark lines, and repetitive geometric forms echo the principle of form following function. Yet Trellick Tower's history reveals how even the best-intentioned social projects can enter a downward spiral when administrative structures fail to adapt. High-rise buildings were already losing favor among city planners by the early 1970s, and Trellick Tower had the misfortune of opening just as public sentiments were shifting. The local council did not implement the kind of security features and communal oversight Goldfinger had recommended, leading to multiple social problems. During the 1970s and early 1980s, the building was plagued by vandalism, crime, and a sense of neglect. Tower residents found themselves in a place nicknamed the Tower of Terror. For a while, Trellick epitomized everything that people disliked about Brutalist estates: tall, unwelcoming, and seemingly indifferent to the very people it sheltered. Individuals and grassroots efforts fought back against this narrative. A residents' association formed in 1984, pushing for controlled access, an intercom system, and eventually a concierge. Over time, Trellick Tower evolved from a symbol of urban dysfunction into a local icon. The large expanses of raw concrete stood the test of time. By the 1990s, Trellick's proximity to more affluent London neighborhoods and the skyrocketing cost of housing sparked renewed interest. Apartments that once nobody wanted soon became trendy, and Trellick went on to achieve Preservation Grade 2 listed status in 1998, permanently preserving its brutalist facade. Its historical significance has only grown over the years, and it is cherished by architects, academics, and even style-conscious buyers who see Trellick Tower as an edgy, authentic piece of London's built heritage. When you place St. John's Abbey Church side by side with Trellick Tower, you see that despite being drastically different in function, one a sacred space and the other a social housing complex, they share some brutalist traits. Both are unapologetically concrete, boldly geometric, and each reveals its structure honestly, with no added veneer. Both also came into being amid ambitions for something new. In Minnesota, it was a radical reimagining of Catholic worship spaces post-World War II. In London, it was the promise of giving working-class families a clean, modern environment. Yet each had to wrestle with the realities of changing public tastes, human complexities, and the reluctance of institutions to fully adopt an architect's vision. Breuer grappled with local committees and an internal power struggle over artistic control, while Goldfinger saw the local administration at the time fail to provide the essential security and social framework that his tower needed. St. John sits amid rolling, wooded acreage. Trellick stands in a bustling urban context. Where the Abbey resonates with spiritual quietude, Trellick hums with city life. In a strange way, though, the drama swirling around both projects echoes that intangible, brutal quality of forging ahead despite criticism, misunderstandings, or even direct opposition. All of this brings us back to our main question. If the film The Brutalist is not actually about brutalist architecture, then why the title? Sometimes brutalism is a stand-in for a certain rawness, a lack of pretension, or a demonstration of stark human realities. The architecture itself, in the hands of Breuer, Bruno, a residents' association, and Goldfinger, stands as a metaphor for resilience, for forging bold new directions in the face of skepticism. It also symbolizes the friction between the lofty ideals of visionaries and the everyday people living or working within those structures. Look at Bronislaw Bach's Tribulations. The story was less about the church's raw concrete than the brutality of clashing visions, hierarchical pressures, and personal sacrifices required to realize an artist's dream. With Trellick Tower, the rough experience of its early residents speaks to the harsh social realities that overshadowed the pure lines of raw concrete. One might guess that the film, by calling itself The Brutalist, hopes to hint at life's unvarnished truths, the emotional and cultural collisions that happen when human ambition meets institutional inertia or prejudice. Perhaps the film's real subject isn't the type of building at all, but rather the relentless, unrefined, and often bruising nature of creating anything new, be it art, architecture, or one's personal destiny. Yes, it might use the language of architecture as an overarching metaphor, weaving together themes of exile, creativity, and perseverance, just as the real architects and artisans had to do. But it's likely addressing matters of identity, displacement, or the hidden personal battles that most of us never see when we admire or despise a building's facade. The title could be intentionally deceptive, luring viewers with the promise of a documentary-like dive into 1960s and 1970s concrete monoliths, only to deliver an emotional tale about the brutalist truths of human life, that sometimes one must stand alone, shaped by raw circumstance, and remain upright amid any storm. If you enjoyed a quiet side of architecture, where I want to explore the emotional impact of the design in the real and fictional worlds, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about the spaces that shape us. I would love to hear your personal encounter with the space. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.